Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot, and welcome to your Zero's SR22T tutorial in Microsoft Flight Simulator. Do note that this is exclusively for entertainment flight simulation use and is not certified as any kind of real-world Zero's training. If you're flying a real airplane, kindly take real training as well in order to get real safety. Alright, so let's get started with some of the basics of the flight we are going to do. We are currently standing at Heidelberg Airport that we can see down here on our Sky Vector map. And from here we're going to fly towards Kiel-Holtenau. That part we are going to do VFR, and we are going then to land and then pick up an IFR flight over to Hamburg. So that's about our plan for the day. Now, the weather is a little bit of a factor here. It's 1st of December when I'm recording this, and it's a rather cold day here in Germany. So looking outside in our flight simulator, we can already see what kind of weather we got in the area. It's a little bit cloudy, and it is most definitely very, very cold. Now, going over the planned route of flight, having another look in the Sky Vector, we've got the two air bases of Hohn and Schleswig right in the middle of our flight, and luckily for us, it is currently early enough that those air bases are closed, so their airspaces are not active, so we don't need permission to fly through them. Now, going over the weather in the middle of our flight, we've got Hohn down here reporting 3,500 meters of visibility, and haze, broken clouds in 1700, temperature -8. And looking at the forecast, we got a tempo forecast until 0900 here, 500 meters, freezing fog, vertical visibility 100, so that's really not the nicest of all conditions. However, luckily for us, a little bit further north we've got Schleswig, and Schleswig is currently reporting 9,000 meters visibility, scattered clouds 1600, broken 3,600, temperature -7, so that is flyable. And they've also got weather becoming down there from 07 to 0900, 8,000 meters, no significant weather, so that is going to be fine for our flight. Looking at our first destination, then we've got Kiel-Holtenau down here, which is showing some light wind from the west. Light snow showers, few clouds in 600, scattered 900, overcast 1700, so that is really not that good of a weather. However, it is legally flyable in VFR conditions. However, seeing that the weather over there, you can see this one is just about 10 minutes old, is constantly deteriorating, and that we've got a forecast of 3,500 meters visibility in light snow and broken clouds 1200, we might just consider doing all the VFR part of things over here in Heidelberg. En route, we're going to talk about the de-icing system of the Zeros, and then we might opt to do an IFR pickup and an RNAV approach into Kiel-Holtenau, and then later on an ILS approach into Hamburg. So we're going to make that dependent on how the weather is going to evolve over the course of our flight. Also, looking at the IFR part of things, we are going to depart Kiel-Holtenau and sit towards Renzu, then we'll fly direct to Bochum. And from Bochum we are going to fly a star into Hamburg, which is going to take us, well, according to SimBrief, 31 minutes, but I'm pretty sure we can do this a little bit quicker than that. Alright, so that is our plan for the day. Now, the Zeros has a lovely automatic checklist feature on the G1000. However, as we are currently still cold and dark, we don't have that available quite yet. So we gotta do the very first part of our startup out of the pilot's operating handbook of the plane, and then as soon as the engine is running, we can use our G1000 checklists, which really make our life a lot easier. The general philosophy in checklists in general aviation is that they are all done as read and do checklists. That basically means you read the item from the checklist, then you do it, and then you confirm that you actually did it. So the philosophy behind these checklists is that general aviation pilots are typically low-time pilots and don't fly very often, so you can't expect them to memorize a flow as good as a commercial pilot doing it several times a day actually can. Okay, so that is a little bit of general stuff over here. I'm going to show you how all of that works in a few moments, so don't worry about it. Okay, so let's start with the before starting engines checklist. The pre-flight inspection is the first item on that. However, we just got to make sure that the airplane is in a fine condition at first, so The walk around I'm going to spare you, because I did figure that most flight simulator pilots really don't care about that stuff. So let's just start with an interior inspection, and we'll just go over it real quick. The starter is off, all the switches down here are off. We can configure the lights as we need, and we certainly don't need panel lights. The instruments will turn up a little bit because they also control the brightness of the G1000 displays. Okay. Then we can go down a little bit, flaps are up, oxygen off, mixture. Well, normally when we receive the airplane, it should really be in the cutoff position. A fuel tank is selected, normally the one that has most fuel in it. However, since we've got full fuel in both, we don't need to bother with that. Alright, and that is basically the check in the panel over here. The last thing is our parking brake is set. Alright, so with that done, let's have a very quick look at our weight and balance, and then we go. So we've got a full load of fuel here, 100%, and we've got ourselves and an instructor in the front seats, and we've got a full load of de-icing fluid on board of the plane as well. And that's pretty much our setup. Okay, so let's start with the before starting engines checklist. Pre-flight inspection complete, weight and balance verified within limits, emergency equipment on board, passengers briefed, seatbelts and harness adjusted and secure. And that's the before starting engines checklist complete, so let's now go ahead with the starting engines. External power, if applicable, connect. So the temperature currently is -5. From -7 onwards, it is advised to use external power and to preheat the engine so that we can get the load on the battery relieved during engine start. However, today is -5, so we are good with that. So brakes hold, that is our parking brake down there. Okay, battery master switch is on. Now let's give the G1000 a moment to start up, but in the meantime we can already do strobe lights on. Mixture, full rich. So now comes the big challenge of actually grabbing the mixture lever instead of the throttle. Like that, looking good. Okay, power lever full forward. That's full forward. And now we can prime the engine. Normally about 2 seconds of priming is enough. However, between 30 and 60 seconds may be required if your engine is really cold soaked. And I'm not talking about -5 degrees outside, I'm talking about a lot less. So we are just going to do 2 seconds of priming over here, and that should be sufficient. So we've got the fuel pump, turn that to the prime position. 21, 22, done. Okay, and after that we're going to set the fuel pump to the boost position. Alright, the propeller area is clear, and then we can reduce our throttle back to the idle position and then open it by about 1/4 of an inch. Alright, and that is sufficient in order to start up the engine now. So, you'll hear FS Realistic scream clear prop in a moment. Do note, that's an American thing. In Europe, we typically don't do that. Okay, so let's go.
Clear prop.
That's it. Hold it to start, engine is running, and back to both, and that's it. Okay, so our engine is running. Quick look at the oil pressure, which is there at 59 psi. And then we can return our power lever into idle. And then when we've done that, have a look at the RPMs down there. That's 975 right now. Next, we want to lean our airplane so that the RPM reaches the maximum. So unfortunately, I got to zoom out a little bit for that. So I do understand it might be a little bit hard to read the gauge up here, but just have a look at that. And now I'm reducing the power a bit, the mixture. And eventually we're going to reach a point where the RPM starts increasing, like you can see right now. So slowly reduce the mixture a bit until you reach like the peak. You can see we've run through that already. Here we go. 1040 RPMs seems to be roughly the highest RPMs we can gather down there. Okay, cool. So with all of that now done, let's continue and turn on the remaining master switches. So we've got our 2 alternators, we've got the avionics master, and with that our remaining G1000 system is also starting up right now. Okay, and basically that is our starting engines checklist already completed. So let's now have a look at the remaining systems we can set up over here. We're going to start with our G1000, and you can see it opens with the before starting engines checklist already opened. However, that checklist is complete, so what we can do, we just go to menu, and then we are going to go down to check all, enter, and with that the checklist is complete. Then we can go ahead with the next checklist. So scroll down to go to next checklist, click open. That's the starting engine checklist. We've already completed that one as well. So once again, menu, check all, enter, and like that the checklist is completed. Now we can just scroll down all the way and go to next checklist. And that's the before taxi checklist. And this one we can actually follow. So we'll start with the flaps up, and the levers up, and the flaps themselves are up as well. You can see sitting in the airplane we are constantly emitting a little bit of moisture, and that freezes on the airplane windows. So that's the reason we see a little bit of ice there, and I'm just going to do something about that by switching the temperature all the way up and then turning on the fan as well. In the real world we'd press that little button up here to heat the windows, and that would normally clear them of any ice. Unfortunately in the simulator that is currently not modeled. So in the real world you'll press that one and then turn this all the way up, the fan. But unfortunately in the simulator that doesn't, that's not simulated. Okay, let's continue with the checklist. So, got the flaps up, radios and avionics as required. So we can continue with that. And the first thing we got to do in here is we'll just go to the engine page down here. And then we go to the fuel and weight and balance page. On this one we're going to initialize the airplane's weight. And we've loaded up a full load of fuel, so we just click the full button, and like that we're now telling the airplane, yep, we have uplifted all the fuel we need. If you want to adjust it more precisely, you can use the FMS knobs down there and adjust it in single gallons of fuel. So that works as well. Okay, so with that done, can either hit enter, that's going to bring you straight to the weight and balance page, or you could just hit the weight and balance button down here, so that also works. On here we can do a little bit of weight and balance now, so a couple of things for us to check. This is in pounds. So taxi fuel you can enter as needed, so we can press the button in the middle down there, lights up the taxi fuel, then scroll on the small one to bring it into the edit mode, then scroll on the big one to change the digit, and I'm just going to go for 10 pounds of taxi fuel that we're going to add in here. Alright, enter that, and now when the entire thing is blinking we can use the big button to scroll on to the next one, and that is fuel reserves. So over here we can now enter our fuel reserves. Again, scroll on the small one to get into the edit mode, and you can see down here we've got fuel on board is now 616 pounds. So let's just say we want 200 pounds of reserve. So we're going to scroll the small one, 200, looking good, hit enter, and now the fuel reserve is entered as well. Alright, when we continue scrolling on the big button, then we get on the right side to the payload. So in here, we basically enter our own weights and the passenger weights and the baggage weights. So we've got 170 pounds pilot, 170 pounds co-pilot, the TKS fluid, we'll talk more about that in flight, 70 pounds, and that is looking good. And with that, we basically don't need to change anything else since we don't have any passengers in the back and we don't have any baggage either. So when we're done, just hit confirm, and like that our weight and balance is now saved in the system. Alright, so that is that. Now, in order for those of you who use the Navigraph charts, we've got the charts button down here, and we'll talk about that in a few moments. But before we do, let's just quickly enter our flight plan. Now, we hit the flight plan button down here, then we click the small button to get into the edit mode, and you can see now origin is blinking. We go one step down, and now in here we can enter our origin airport. And you can either just use the scroll wheels to enter that, the old-fashioned style, but I prefer to do it the new-fashioned style. And you can see we've just got a keyboard down here with the SR22 in Sim Update 14. Third-party developers can also implement that into their aircraft, by the way, so chances are we're going to see this in more aircraft in the future. But for us, let's go ahead and start over here. We're departing Echo Delta X-Ray Bravo, enter, and since we're VFR, we don't need to set any runway, so we're just going to press enter again. Now let's go on to the destination, and that is going to be Echo Delta Hotel Kilo. Kiel Holtenau. Enter, and we are not going to enter a runway there either. Now the en route field is blinking, so let's scroll down into the en route, and we are going to enter our route there. Now, remember when we had a look at our flight plan in the pre-flight where we said that we wanted to fly via Schleswig Air Base? Like that? So that's what we're going to enter up here. That's Echo Tango November Sierra Airport over there. So that is going to be our en route part. So Echo Tango November Sierra, enter, and that's it. So that's our first route completed. So in order to get out of edit mode, I'm just going to push the cursor down here once again. And with that, our flight plan is completely entered. The next thing we're going to do is for Navigraph users only, that is to go to the charts down here, because that brings us into the menu of our departure airport. And over here we get things like the airport's frequency. And that is what we're going to uplink to the COM. So press the cursor, scroll all the way down to the frequency, then I'm going to press enter, and it offers us to transfer the frequency to the COM1 active. And that will do. And now you can see our COM1 has automatically been set to the airport frequency. Alright, with that done, let's go back. And now we can quickly set up the rest of our avionics. So on the top right of the PFD, we got our comms. You can see right now we are working on the top one, since the blue one is the one you added, and you've got the key for it down here. Now what we want to do is to go to the COM2 and set 1 to 1.5 actors. So we push the button in the middle, and then we're going to set 1 to 1.5 in here, and switch it active like that. Alright, cool. And now I'm just going back with the cursor to my COM1, because that is where I want to add it in case I need to. Okay, so this is this. Now next up we got to set our altimeter, and luckily this one's pre-selected 1006 hectopascal, which is what we've got, and 0 to about 10 feet is our airfield elevation here as well. Okay, going further down to the bottom of the G1000, we've got our transponder, where we make sure we've got our VFR squawk in. You can see the button is already illuminated and it's squawking 7000, which is what we use in Europe to indicate a VFR flight to ATC. In the US it would be 1200. And next up we are also going to switch our transponder on already, because in case you're operating on a controlled airport that has a ground radar, you are going to pop up on the controller screen. Alright then, let's go back over here, and the next thing we're going to do is the CDI, and we are going to select whatever we want to use for navigation. You can see right now it's in log 1 mode, or in nav 1. Let's hit that. Now we are in log 2, hit that again, and now we're in GPS. And the GPS is basically what we want to use for our flight. Finally, personally, I really like to go into the PFD options, and then wind option 3, that's what we are seeing down here, or up here once we're airborne. Then I also want the DME to be shown, the bearing 1, and bearing 2 we are going to set to nav 2, like that. Talking about the nav receivers, we got the frequencies on the top left corner of the right hand display, and in here I'm basically just going to deselect the ILS frequencies we had there by default, and I'm just going to put some VOR frequencies active. That's an old habit from the 737, so don't worry about that too much. But personally, I just don't like to have ILS frequencies active in the radio. Okay, so next thing, let's set our cruise alt. So what we are going to do over here, we've got the controls down here in the autopilot panel, and I'm just going to select something that is going to be good for the first couple of exercises we want to do. So let's start with 3,000 feet of altitude. Like so. Alright, so with all of that part of the setup now completed, we are basically ready to go. So let's go back into the checklist and continue. So radios and avionics are checked. Cabin heat and defrost, we've turned it all on. And the fuel selector, switch tank. This one we do because we want to make sure that the engine doesn't quit. So over to the right hand tank, engine keeps running. and that is the before taxi checklist complete. Alright, now let's click open and we go to the next checklist, which is the taxi checklist. You can read that warning for yourself if you want to. Now, we are going to just tick the item and then go down. So for the taxi checklist, that's something that is going to happen as we move the airplane. So let's just read ahead. Park and brake disengage, brakes check, HSI orientation check, attitude gyro check, and turn coordinator check. So those 3 checks basically mean that when you are going through a turn on your taxi, make sure the HSI is changing, make sure the attitude is staying appropriate, and finally, in terms of turn coordinator, check up here that it is actually moving. So that is what we check as we turn left, as we turn right. We just want to make sure that the airplane actually does what it's supposed to do. Alright then, so let's go and start taxiing. Some of you may want to turn the landing lights on for taxi because you don't have a dedicated taxi light in the airplane. Now, that really comes down to pilot preference. Wow, and we are picking up a lot of ice here. Let's hope that that's going to get better in flight. Okay, so personally, I'm going to leave those landing lights off for the taxi. So, park and brake off. Sometimes you need a little bit of a breakaway thrust, but then it's usually taxis fine and idle, provided that you're above 1000 RPMs. And you can kind of see that up here. Okay, so that's idle power now. It says 9%, but that is idle. And you can see we even need to brake a little bit in order to keep our speed under control. Okay, the right side is clear, the left side is invisible. That's a lot of ice. But I suppose that's going to go away in flight. Okay, so it's a fairly short taxi to runway 11. For a run-up, we're just going to turn the airplane away a little bit, so that we don't blow into everything behind us, like that. Right, so let's set that park and brake again, and now let's quickly tick off the taxi checklist. We've checked everything here during our actual taxi work, so that is done. Okay, cool, so go to next checklist, and that's the before takeoff checklist. This is a lot of stuff now, so let's go over it slowly. Warning, do not take off with frost, ice, snow or other contamination on the fuselage, wing, stabilizers and control surfaces. So, on the window, actually fine. Okay, so, next item, caution. Because this aircraft has a turbocharged system that maintains 36 inches manifold pressure for all takeoffs, the mixture should be full rich for takeoff even at high elevation airports. Leaning for takeoff and during maximum performance climb may cause excessive cylinder head temperature. So that warning is noted. Okay, door, latched, caps handle, that's up here, and caps basically is the Cirrus aircraft protection system. It's basically a little parachute that you can eject out of the airplane, and you can see the handle is removed. Okay, seatbelts and shoulder harness secured, air conditioner as desired. We don't have an air conditioner in this airplane, so we don't need to worry about that. Okay, fuel quantity confirmed. We're full. Fuel selector, fullest tank. Well, they're both equally full, so we're just going to keep it on the right tank. Fuel pump, boost. That's set to boost down here. Mixture, full rich. Full rich. Flaps set 50% and check. Okay, so down to 50%. You can see the flaps moving on both sides likewise. Okay, transponder set. So we are going to go into the transponder down here and going to switch it into alt mode. So we got Squawk 7000 for VFR and alt. You check both things, Squawk and mode. Okay, autopilot check. Basically in here, we can do a couple of things with the autopilot. You know, turn it on, put it in a heading mode, select the left heading, select the right heading, make sure the controls are following. That lovely stuff. But in Flight Simulator, you don't need to worry about that. Okay, navigation radius and GPS set for takeoff. They are. Cabin heat and defrost as required. We turn them all up to the maximum already. So, brakes, hold. Power lever 1700 RPMs. Again, the RPMs are located just down here under the actual power indication. As you put the power up, always have a look outside to see that the brake is actually holding the plane. So So slowly increasing my power lever. And here we go, 1700. Okay, alternator check, and that includes, when we check the alternator, we are going to turn on the pitot heat, nav lights, landing lights, and then check that we don't get the alternator 1 and 2 caution lights on the cath over here, and then check the voltage as well. So let's go to the engine page now, and we've got our alternator indication down here. We can see they're at plus 15 on each at the moment. So let's now go ahead and turn on our electrical systems. So watch that. Pitot heat on, we can see an increase in the current. Now same for the nav lights and for the landing lights. So that's just making sure that all of these things actually work. Okay, so that is our alternator check, and the bus voltage is looking good over here as well. Right, so back into the checklist. So we can tick all of these off. We've also checked for the annunciator lights, we didn't get them. The voltage has been checked as well. Pitot heat as required, and that note down here is quite important. Pitot heat should be turned on for flights in an IMC, flight under visible moisture, or whenever ambient temperatures are 5 degrees or less. Personally, I would recommend just turn the pitot heat on for all your flights. Okay, navigation lights as required. Well, it's a daylight flight, so technically speaking we could turn them off, but let's just leave them on. Okay, landing lights as required, we'll keep it on as we're about to take off. Magnetos, check left and right. RPM drop must not exceed 150 RPMs for either magneto. RPM differential must not exceed 75 RPM between magnetos. So, ignition switch right, note RPM, then both. Ignition switch left, note RPM, then both. So let's go ahead and do that. Ignition switch is down here. RPMs are up here, so our eyes need to jump a little bit. So we start with a switch on the right side, and we lost about 40 RPMs there. Back to both. Now let's do the left side. Again losing about 40 RPMs. And back to both. So, the condition up here has been met. Engine parameters check. So we just look completely over everything here. Everything's green, so that's good. Okay, power lever back to 1000 RPMs. And that's the run-up complete. So, flight instruments, HSI, and altimeter check and set. So once again, we just check that our heading is showing correct, our altimeter is showing correct, and basically just have a look over the entire flight instruments. Okay, flight controls, free and correct. Don't have any flight control indication in the SR22, but since it's mechanical controls, you just move them in their full range and make sure that there is nothing preventing the movement or nothing making the movement difficult. Okay, trim set for takeoff. Now that's a little tricky. You've got a little indicator down here which basically shows you your trim setting. However, in Maxstar Flight Simulator that's a little bit problematic there because the thing isn't actually moving. So you can see that I'm trimming right now and nothing happens. So in Maxstar Flight Simulator that's a bit difficult. In the real world, when you trim the plane, the neutral position of your stick would simply change. Like that. And like that you could then read the trim on the scale up there on the stick, but unfortunately that is not available. By the way, thank you very much to a lot of guys in my Discord, in the working title Discord, and underneath my first look video who gave me that little hint of where to find the trim scale. Okay, and autopilot disconnect, and we can see it's disconnected. Okay, and that is the before takeoff checklist complete. Down here now we've got an additional part of the checklist that's been added by the installation of the anti-ice system. Now, if icing conditions are anticipated immediately after takeoff, well, seeing that we've got a couple clouds here, the air is probably rather moist, so yeah, let's say we do anticipate them today immediately after takeoff. Ice Protect system switch on. Ice protection mode switch norm, it's down here, norm. Pitot heat switch on, is on. Cabin heat hot, that's hot. Windshield defrost on, so that's that little button down here. And you just press that. Okay, Ice inspection lights as needed. It's daylight, so we don't need those. Verify airframe is free of contamination immediately before takeoff. Well, Microsoft Flight Simulator. We'll skip over that. We can see, actually right now, there is some contamination down there on the leading edges. So like that, we would not be allowed to take off. However, I do absolutely not see where that should realistically come from right now. So, Microsoft Flight Simulator. We'll skip over that. Okay, flaps retract as soon as practical after takeoff. And that's the before takeoff checklist complete. So if we go to the next checklist, we got our normal takeoff instructions. So let's quickly read over those. Brakes release and steer with the rudder only, so no differential braking. Power lever full forward, engine parameters check. So with the lever full forward, we just check over here that we don't see any abnormal indications. Elevator control rotates smoothly at 77 to 80 knots, and at 90 knots flaps up. Note, fuel boost should be left on during takeoff and for climb as required for vapor suppression with hot or warm fuel. Now today is a very cold day, so technically we could turn the fuel boost pump off. However, for simplification purposes, we should probably just keep it on in order to simplify our procedures. But today it's cold, so you could actually turn it off if you wanted to. Okay, let's go ahead and check all of those. And then we'll move on to the next checklist, because that stuff we are not going to do read and do that right during takeoff. Okay, short field takeoff, that is going to be for a separate tutorial, so let's just go over that. And next up we've got our different climb techniques, and we are not going to worry about those too much. So for takeoff, I would personally like to select the engine page, and with that we are now ready to go. A quick last word over here about our primary flight display. If you see some stuff on there that's blinking, if you click that caution button, it's going to give you details for the alert. And that also stops them blinking. Now the anti-ice speed we see over there comes up because our speed has to be a minimum of 95 knots for correct operation of the anti-ice system. I'll go into details about that a little bit further in the flight, and I'll probably make a separate tutorial about it as well. The other one, park and brake is set, is obviously logical. Okay, the last preparation I personally like to do prior to takeoff is to go to the time and reference page and use that big wheel up there to scroll to the start button. That way, when we initiate our takeoff run, we just need to hit enter and we are starting our flight timing. Alright, and with that, we are fully prepared for our takeoff. So at first we're going to turn out of the pattern, and we're just going to find a patch of clear sky where we can climb up a little bit and do a couple of low speed exercises and stuff like that, so that we can customize ourselves with the handling of the SR22T. Okay, brake released, let's taxi on the runway. So that's runway 11 confirmed. The windsock is showing the wind's just about cross. I'm just going to backtrack a little bit up here because I want to take that full runway. Might have to increase power a bit to get around that turn. Okay then, we are going to establish ourselves on the center line. And then again, the takeoff technique. Let's just revise that. We are going to release the brakes, smoothly but steadily apply maximum power. At between 77 to 80 knots, we're going to rotate. And remember, we don't have a retractable landing gear. I've personally looked for that switch for quite a bit, but no, we don't have a retractable gear. Okay, so, are you ready? Then, take off. Start the timer. Power set. Okay, rotate. So, between 5 and 10 degrees of pitch. And that's a positive rate of climb there. Okay, so we are going to accelerate towards VY, the best rate of climb speed. and we are going to use that speed for our initial climb. We basically want to get to 600 feet as quickly as possible because of the ability to use the cap system once we get up there. Okay, we've got a good rate, we're through 400 feet, so let's go flaps up. And now we're going to maintain VY. And you can see that Cirrus is giving us quite a good rate of climb over here. So some 1300 to 1500 depending on the conditions and the weight can certainly be expected. When it's hot, maybe just about 1000 feet a minute. Okay, so we are going to turn out of the traffic pattern here. We're going to climb initially something about 3000 feet, maybe 4000, depending on what the cloud coverage makes possible today. And then we're going to start with a little bit of air work. Alright, so airplane is trimmed out, that's looking good. Then we can have a very quick look into the checklists again. Close the engine page and open the checklist page. Alright, so oxygen as required is currently off, as we don't plan to climb too high. Then power lever full forward, mixture maintain fuel in the green arc. So that's what you've got over here. Your fuel flow needs to stay within that, and you're going to use the mixture lever in order to achieve that. Okay, flaps very far up. Airspeed, they say 120 for a normal full power climb. Now, we are just going to keep the best rated climb speed up here in order to get our target altitude as quickly as possible. So, airspeed is fine. Fuel pump, boost, that's where it is. Fuel flow monitor, engine parameters monitor. And with that, our full power climb ridge of peak technique is completed. Okay, so we've got a little bit more room up here above those clouds, so let's just climb a bit higher anyway. So let's select slightly higher altitude, maybe 5,000 or so. Then we certainly have sufficient room underneath our airplane for our stall exercises. For now, we are just getting a general feeling of the handling technique of the airplane, and we are going to find ourselves a spot away from the clouds so that we can see the ground at all times. Okay then, back to the engine page. Alright, and this is looking quite well to me over here. So, indeed, a little bit of icing here. Now, that icing on the wings is unrealistic. We didn't fly through anything that could have caused that. So, I don't know, maybe it's a bug in the Sim Update 14 beta that I'm using to record this, or I don't know. In any case, it's, well, not realistic. And it doesn't seem to have an impact on the flight performance either. As you can see, the airplane is climbing perfectly fine, according to the values of the pilot's operating handbook. Alright, we're going to stop the climber at 5,000. Smoothly level it off, trim it out, and we are going to reduce power. Now, according to Cirrus, for the first 25 flight hours, you shouldn't use cruise powers below 75%. That's because the engine needs to, you know, get running smoothly over the time, and it just needs to, you know, find its appropriate cruising power. So, for that reason, use 75% power for your first 25 hours, and thereafter you can always get out of that and use less power as well. Now, typically, if we just wanted to do some airwork exercises, we could go all the way back to 55% power, like this. Normally, whenever we are reducing power, we would also lean the airplane. However, since we plan to do some airwork, I'm not going to lean it quite yet. I will explain how to do that and how to use the lean assist in a few moments. Okay, so flying out to the ocean and over some holes in the clouds so that we will not have any problems with visibility in case we do accidentally get into a spin or accidentally get into any sort of maneuver that we do not want to be in. Okay, so The first couple of maneuvers you are typically going to do in a new airplane is just a standard rate turn and a little bit of climbs and descents and stuff like that. So we're going to cut those a little bit short by first of all matching the heading bug. Now let's do a standard rate 1 turn to the right. And a rate 1 turn basically means we are going to fly that mark on the needle and bolt indicator. Now, we don't have that in this airplane. We've just got one up here, verifying that our plane is indeed in trim. But what we have is a standard formula. So you've got the true airspeed just below the indicated airspeed down here, saying 150 knots. If you take that, divide it by a 10 and add 7, that gives you your bank angle for a standard rate turn. So got about 150 knots up here. So if we make that 22 degrees angle of bank, that is going to be just perfect. So let's start a right-hand turn over here, 22 degrees. You will need a little bit of rudder. Don't let yourself be fooled by the fact that there's a yaw damper over there. That yaw damper really only becomes necessary if you fly speeds greater than about 200 knots true airspeed, because that's when the compressibility effects of the air start to matter. So for us today, the yaw damper is there, it's fine. It's also preventing a little bit of the airplane rolling left and right, but it is not a yaw damper in the sense of an airliner that it would provide turn coordination. It provides a bit of an input, but you do need to do some work on the rudder yourself, so be prepared for that. Right, so as you can see, quite easy to maneuver the airplane in a standard turn to the right. Let's also do the same to the left. Again, use your rudder to keep the slip indicator centered. Here we go, about 22 degrees, and you can see the airplane is flying just about perfect with that. Alright, so easy going, isn't it? I would say we can roll out to the north. And here we go. Okay, so next exercise is going to be steep turns. For steep turns, we need to have a very good panel scan so that we can monitor any deviations and correct for them as soon as possible. So we're at 140 knots. We're going to use at first 45 degrees of bank, maybe later 60. Once we roll through 30, we need to pull a little bit stronger on the stick and need to increase thrust a little bit. So the target is to maintain 140 knots, maintain 5,000 feet, and like that, we can now start our steep turn to the left at first. Going through 30, increase power a bit, 45 degrees, pull back on the controls, maintain 5,000, and as you can see, with a good panel scan, that works just about perfectly. We descended a bit there, let's pull up a tiny bit in order to get back onto it. Also keep an eye on the speed to maintain 140 knots. You can see we had to increase power a little bit to like 60%, but like that the airplane's doing it pretty perfectly. Losing a tiny bit of speed, let's add a bit more power, 65 maybe. Okay, approaching heading and roll out. Alright, here we are, perfectly back on a northerly heading. Power back to 55%, roundabout, and let's do the same thing to the other side. So, 45 degrees off bank, maintaining 5,000 feet more or less. Obviously the aim is to maintain it precisely, so let's get back to 5,000. And here we are. So, just about perfect. And that is our airwork exercises. Approaching heading, starting the rollout, and here we are perfectly on the 360 heading, almost at least. Power back to 55, make sure the airplane is still in trim by releasing the stick for a little bit, and like that we are now set up. Okay, let's turn back into the general direction of Büsum Airport, because we want to do a couple of touch and goes there in a few moments. But we've got one more exercise to do before we return for our touch and goes, and that is going to be our approach to stall. So there is a little bit of information in the Cirrus Pilot Operating Handbook about approaches to stall and stall handling in general. Now, the most important thing here is the SR22 behaves rather normal during stall exercises, so we're expecting standard airplane behavior. However, there can be a little bit of a wobbling of the nose as we approach the actual stall scenario, so just keep that in mind. I'm going to fly around these clouds over there so that we don't accidentally drop into them during our stall recovery exercises. We're going to fly back to that part of the ocean over there, so that if we go swimming, at least we'll see it coming. Okay, cool. So, we can do both power on and power off stalls on the plane. When we do a power on stall, it can develop a pretty rapid rate of descent when the elevator is pulled all the way to the maximum. That's what the aircraft's quick reference handbook, or, well, pilot's operating handbook, that way around, says. Oh boy, those airlines keep confusing me. Okay, so, well, we've got the sun directly in our face. Let's get that sun shield down, and then we can get going. So, we are getting about clear of the clouds. Just want to make sure that we don't accidentally drop into something. But we should be above the clear sector by now. Okay, so let's reduce power to idle. Let's see, fuel pump is on, power is idle. That is all fine. Okay, maintaining 5,000 while slowly reducing the speed. Do not trim the airplane when you do an exercise like this. Just leave it trimmed for your normal state. That's going to help with the stall recovery later on. So the aim is to maintain 5,000 feet. In the past, there used to be a requirement not to lose more than 100 feet of altitude during the stall recovery exercise, but that requirement has been scrapped nowadays because too many pilots accidentally tried to do that same thing when they got into an actual stall, and the result was simply that they got a secondary stall and then crashed the airplane. Okay, here's the approach to stall warning. So, pitch down a little, add power, recover. You can see we lost about 130 feet or so, but that was totally fine. Okay, now let's do the same thing with our flaps extended. So, flaps 50%. The maximum speed for that is 150 knots, by the way. And the top of the white bar that you've got on the speed indicator is only for full flaps, so that's 110. So we can do that now as well. Okay, we can disregard that flaps ice warning there because we are currently not in actual icing conditions. Ooh, that was aggressive. Okay, retract flaps to 50. Well, we got it back. That was aggressive. Okay, retract the flaps completely. And that's good. Okay, so we are not really in icing conditions, so I'm just going to turn that anti-icing system off again down there. And with that, our approach to stall exercises are basically complete for idle. Let's climb back to 5,000 and we'll do one more, and this one is going to be power on stall. So let's just set a typical approach power setting, maybe like 50% or so. Now we're going to pull it into stall, and this time there's a warning in the pilot's operating handbook that it might descend rapidly. So let's see what's going to happen. Okay, well, that was easy. Let's see what happens if we pull an actual stall. See, that's secondary stall due to our G loading right now. Let's give it a little. And down it goes. Okay. That's probably what they mean with a rapid rate of descent with the power on stall there. 5,000 feet a minute. That is rapid. Okay then. Let's go idle power. Keep clear a little bit of the icing here. Let's start a descending turn to our right. And like that, we're going to start our approach into Heide-Büsum Airport. So, as we do that, a very quick look into the next couple of checklists we got. So, we can skip over a couple here. Let's go... Give me the checklist menu. Then we can go straight down to the V4 landing checklist. Enter that. So, we've got seat belt and shoulder harness, secured fuel pumps, boost. That's where they are. Mixture is rich. Flaps as required. Autopilot as required. And if icing conditions are anticipated for approach and landing, we're going to turn the ice protection system on. Well, I don't think we are going to expect actual icing conditions on those approaches, so we're just going to leave the anti-icing system off. As I mentioned, the visual cues unfortunately don't seem too much of an indication, but as you can see, the ice is actually clearing right now, so everything's looking good. Alright, very good. So that is the V4 landing stuff we got in there. For the actual approach itself, we're going to use a speed between 80 and 85 knots, depending on how turbulent it is. And landings are normally conducted with the flaps at 100%. So full flaps is what we're going to use for our approach. So we're going to do a couple of touch and goes right now. And after that, we'll take the airplane en route and then have a look into a couple of the techniques we can use for climb, a couple of the things we need to know in cruise, and we're also going to have a look into the de-icing system. Even though I am going to do a full tutorial on the de-ice system because it is a little bit special compared to what you may be used to from your typical general aviation aircraft. So the de-ice system is probably going to get a separate tutorial, but we are going to run a summary of the most important stuff as we carry on this particular flight. Okay, so first exercise is to find the airport. We know it's somewhere on our right hand side, and we could obviously just cheat and use the map down there, but that would be cheating, so we're flying VFR, so we're just looking outside the window. Also back to the engine display over there. Most important thing here for the approach, mixture is full rich, boost pump is on, and the flaps we're going to do as needed. You can see what kind of rates of descent the SR22 gets us, and remember, it is an unpressurized airplane, so you don't necessarily want to descend with more than 1,000 feet a minute. That would turn out, well, probably not so nice. Okay, our airfield should be somewhere over there, I believe. Or is it? No, over there. That's our airfield. So we're going to start from a right-hand pattern, but we'll make sure we don't overfly those villages. If you want to increase your radar descent, your best way to do that is take the flaps out. 50% flaps can be set up to 150 knots, so if you need some drag, that's your best way of getting it. Right, just maintaining altitude for a bit in order to get the speed below 110, which is our flaps 100 speed. And here we go, flaps going out to 100%. Speed is coming back. It's a little bit shaky, but it's not really too turbulent. So we're going to use 80 knots as our approach speed. If it gets turbulent or if there's icing, at least 5 knots of speed onto your approach speed. So between 80 and 85 is certainly going to be good like now, and if it's getting too turbulent, then between 85 and 90 is going to be a good speed for the approach. Alright, and that is looking good. Now, in Microsoft Flight Simulator, aircraft tend to float quite a bit, and we got to try and prevent that by pulling the power off a little bit earlier than we would do in the real world. In the real world, you just make sure that you pull the power by the time the airplane touches down, but in the sim, you know, if we pull the power now, then you'll see that we'll actually end up still floating in quite a bit. Alright, make sure to land on the 2 main wheels. Here we go. Okay, flaps back to 50%. Slowly add power. Trim down a little bit. Power set. Rotate. Okay, increase the speed towards VY. You can also use VX to get the best rate of climb. Both are going to work. Oh, sorry, VX to get the best angle and VY to get the best rate. I'm going to use VY today. Okay, passing 400, flaps up. And you can see we've been flying on the right-hand tank for pretty much the entire flight now. So the system automatically gives us a fuel imbalance warning down there. We're going to level off at 800 feet for the pattern. Reduce power. In a traffic pattern, you know, stuff like 45% usually works pretty well. Okay, then I'm going to start our left-hand turn here. Into the upwind. But look at your speed right now, 120 knots. For a traffic pattern that's actually rather quick, so try 35%. You know, if you can keep the speed anywhere around 100 knots or so, that usually is going to work quite well. And most importantly, it is going to fit you inside where the other aircraft in the pattern are flying. The SR22 got a lot of power, so it can easily accelerate to 130, 140 knots in a pattern, but you don't want to do that. You want to keep it slow. And if you need to, then you can even leave your flaps extended in the 50% position for the entire traffic pattern. Okay, rather hard to see outside right now, but should be okay. Our wingtips are staying clear. The ice on the windshields is getting a little stronger, but the wingtips are still clear. Okay, see that? 35% seems to work quite well. I'm quickly going to shift the fuel tank here so that the imbalance doesn't develop much longer. Okay, our field should be somewhere abeam in a few moments. Okay, flaps 50% when we're reaching the beam position. And just let your speed gently come back. Actually rather hard to see that field at all right now. Oh yeah, there it is, just a beam in the middle of the screen. Okay, good. Then let's turn base, flaps 100. Speed is coming back, and we're going to do another touch and go. The challenge on these touch and goes now is to get your speed under control in a manner that you can adjust it, or that you can adjust the point where you pull your power to a point where you actually no longer need to worry about your point of touchdown. You want to touch down pretty much towards the beginning of the runway. That's going to be very important for short field landings later on, but those are going to be part for a separate tutorial. Right, that's a field. Turning final. Then let's see how we are going to end up. A little bit high right now, so let's get off the power. And down there is our airfield. Okay, this time you see coming in a little bit high. So if we just duck under a bit, then we are going to end up with a little bit of a flare. Alright, that's our second landing. Flaps back to 50. Trim down a little bit and add power. Power set, rotate. Okay, that was a little bit too high during the approach, so we are going to work on that for our next one. Speed is increasing nicely towards VY. Okay, VY is reached, 400 feet, flaps up. Okay, turning upwind. 800 feet pattern altitude, power back to 35. Like so. And we're going to do one more touch and go, and thereafter we are set course for our en route part of things. Okay, over there is our field. We can turn into the base now. You also want to have a look at your bank angle during the traffic pattern. Never use more than 30, but you can use as little as standard rate 1 turn. So that's 120 knots true airspeed right now. Divided by 10 plus 7 gives you roughly 19 degrees bank angle, which would be your standard bank angle for a turn like this. Okay, a small village over there, let's not overfly that. We'll just go a bit to the left here. We probably took the upwind a little bit wide anyway. Okay, that's our airfield just over there, so we are slowly getting into the beam position. So let's go flaps 50. Speed is slowly coming back, very nice. Okay, just past beam the threshold of the runway. Fly a little bit further straight, and then we can make our left-hand turn. Okay, so that's the rate 1 turn. A little bit less even now, 17 degrees at 100 knots true airspeed. Make sure that we don't descend into the wind turbines. Flaps 100. And here we go. So just keeping a little bit of altitude here while we fly above the turbines, and then we gotta lose that in a few moments. So there is our field. Let's start losing that altitude. Keep an eye on speed as well, and turn final. Okay, this time our altitude is looking better. Okay, let's try power off now and see how close to the runway we're actually going to touch down. Let's just Microsoft Flight Simulator. Okay, that was alright. Flaps 50, set power, and this time we're going to set course for our en route part of the tutorial. Okay, power set, 80 knots, rotate. We'll let the speed increase towards VY, and once that is reached we're going to, like now, increase our rate of climb in order to reach the 600 feet, which is the minimum altitude for the caps. Okay, so that is looking good so far. Now next up we are going to go en route, and we'll see a little bit about our airplane system and about what our airplane can do. So first of all, we are going to retract our flaps since we're above 400, and now we can leave that traffic pattern. We'll leave it directly into our target direction of flight. So 120 knots is the en route climb speed that we are supposed to use. Like so. Alright, so let's bring on the autopilot so that we get a little bit of time for some other stuff. So, autopilot on, heading, and in terms of altitude, let's climb to 3000 initially. Because now we want to do a slightly different procedure there. If we go back to the checklist, let's go into the... Oh, come on. Exit that. Here we go. Checklist. Now let's look for the cruise climb lean of peak technique. That is what we want to use. So power lever reduced to 30.5 inches. We can see our inches down there, and we're going back to 30.5. Like that. Mixture, lean to cyan target or less. So if you go to the engine page up here, you can see we've got that cyan target over there. So if we go to the mixture lever now, we just lean it down to that cyan point. Like so. Okay, let's just continue that climb for a bit. Just to demonstrate the procedure. This airplane just climbs much too fast, does it? Okay, 120 knots target is set. Okay, let's go back into the checklist. So power lever reduced 30.5 inches. Mixture lean to cyan target, that's what we've got down there. Minimum airspeed 120 knots. Fuel pump boost is set. Oxygen as required. We don't need it today, so we can ignore all that. Cylinder at temperature monitor, so we look at those down here to make sure we don't exceed anything. And this is basically the Zero's cruise climb. That's a little bit more economic, since we're flying at a slightly reduced power, and most importantly reduced fuel flow. And we just climb a little bit less, as you can see. So that's a pretty handy technique you can use in the SR22 for your climbs. And actually, since you don't have a pressure cabin, that is what we are going to use for most of our climbs. Okay, reaching 4,000 feet. We might just about want to think about what we do with that weather over there, if we fly around it or if we fly beneath it. But tell you what, we are just going to go around it. So let's do heading maybe 070 or something the likes. And that should be sufficient to deviate around the weather. Okay, so reached our 4,000 feet cruising altitude. Then we can go to the cruise checklist. So, oxygen as required, we don't need it down here. Cruise altitude established, power lever reduced to 30.5 inches or less. So let's talk about the different cruise power settings that we've got available in the SR22. You've got several possibilities of what you can do. We're going to start with the high-speed cruise, and that is basically achieved with 75% power. Here you go, 75%. Alright, so that is set. Next up, fuel pump as required. Note the fuel pump must be set to boost during maneuvering flight, example flight training maneuvers, chandelles, stalls, etc. We don't plan to do any more of those, so let's go ahead and turn the fuel pump off. And next we are going to lean our mixture adjust. So let's now go to the engine page. And on here we've got an assist button that we can use to lean our engine. Now let's go ahead and do that. So what we are going to do is we are going to slowly reduce our mixture and until we find our peak over here. So before we start with the assist, let's just bring the mixture all the way to the forward so that you can see it in action. So we'll start with the assist. Now I'm slowly reducing mixture, and you can see the EGT is going to increase until at a certain point it's going to start decreasing, like now. And with that peak, we've basically found the optimum temperature for the engine. So now we can adjust the mixture to that setting. And when we do that, you can see it's pretty close to the cyan indicator on the fuel flow gauge, because that setting is not only what you're trying to achieve during flight, but that setting is also what your airplane is going to calculate. So the computers of the plane are going to calculate that stuff for you as well. Okay, then let's turn a little bit to the left now. That's the weather that we don't want to fly over. We might just about have to start descending again. I have a feeling at 4,000 we are certainly too high, so tell you what, let's go back down towards 2,000 or something. Okay, vertical speed minus 700. Just gonna leave the power where it is, but you'll see temperatures are going to change as we are descending. Okay, so, when you found that peak, that's kind of where you want to operate the plane, because that is giving you the most power out of the airplane. If you want to go for best economy, then you can reduce the mixture a little bit further until the engine starts to run a little bit rough. But you can see how we are already losing power as I'm reducing mixture further. See that? We're really losing a lot of power here, and we don't want to do that. So that's our 75% power setting. Now, the most economical setting for cruise flight is 65%. With most economical in this case, I mean the setting where our airplane is going to cover the greatest distance with the least fuel usage. So 65%, if we reduce to that now. Here we go, down to 65. Obviously we need to restart the lean assist. So let's just bring the mixture forward again. Move to somewhere where we can actually grab that lever. Then we're going to go into the assist. Now we'll start reducing our mixture slowly again, provided I can find the click spot. Here it is. Alright, here's our peak. We're going to go about 50 degrees lean off that peak. Oh, nope, that was the wrong click spot there. Right, here we go. So, let's go about 50 degrees lean. Okay, tell you what, we'll level off first. This doesn't really work that well during descent. And it looks like we need to go even a bit lower. But let's first turn onto our correct course. Okay. Direct to, ETNS, enter, activate, and nav. Right, GPS up there. So that's the target course that we would like to fly in the optimal case. Okay, we can see through that cloud, so not too much of a problem. But let's turn some of that anti-ice on again. We're also going to put the windshield anti-ice on. And we still have to descend a little bit further. Maybe 1,500. So that's the fun of flying VFR in winter conditions. Well, talk about flying VFR. We can still see the ground, see that? So we're still legal. Technically. But just because we're in Class Golf airspace. In Echo that would have been illegal. We can see the ground, so in Golf we're legal. Okay, so just gotta establish at an altitude where we can focus on the explanation a little bit further. That's looking better. Right, up there is our airbase. For Navigraph users among you, you can quickly grab the latest weather if you go to the main page. Then you go into charts, weather. Now when we hit the cursor, can go to the airport menu up there. Let's just get Echo Tango November Sierra. Nope, doesn't do that in Navigraph it seems. Okay, so for Navigraph we still need to do the conventional way, but I'm sure they're going to update the plugin once the once this is out of beta. So Echo Delta November and Sierra, Schleswig. So latest weather over here, 10 kilometers broken 4000, minus 6, 1008. Okay, set QNH 1008. Here we go. Well, that doesn't look like broken 4000 though. Maybe directly over at the base, but not anywhere else. Okay, we're out of the icing conditions again. Ice protection system going off. Okay. So, that's just for Navigraph users though. And I do believe we're clear enough that we can go direct to our destination as well. So let's go flight plan, destination, direct, enter, enter. Turning to the right, and we should stay well clear over here. Nice little winter flight, by the way, isn't it? Okay, so 11,500, let's lean. So back to the engine page. First of all, we set the power. Well, first of all, we put the mixture all the way to the top. So mixture all the way. Power, give me 65%. Here we go. And now we'll start leaning. So reset that lean assist, off and on again. And this one, we are going to go for maximum economy, provided we can find the lever. Come on. That click spot needs a little bit of work there. Okay, so we just reduce that until we find the peak. Here it is. That's the peak now found. And we want to go about 50 degrees below the peak. Let's take that, increase the mixture a tiny bit. Now we gotta work very slowly. See, that's how easy you can miss it. Here we go, minus 50. Alright, and with that, we are now leaned for the best economy in terms of minimum fuel usage for a given distance of flight. Okay, so that's that. Now we are leaned for operation. Okay, so I promised you a little information about the airplane's anti-icing system. You just saw me use it a little bit there, but the most information is going to be in a separate dedicated tutorial. For us today, what we want to worry about is just a little bit of general understanding of how the system works and why. So, first of all, the anti-ice system is only going to work when the airplane is in flight with a speed of 95 knots minimum and 177 knots maximum. Our anti-ice indications are located down here, and you can see we've got 2 tanks of de-icing fluid in here. They can take a maximum of 4 gallons each. You can see we started with about 3.4, we're now down to 3. On the right hand side here you can see the time for which the anti-icing system can run. So on normal it can run with a given fluid for 1 hour and 53 minutes, on high for 56, and a maximum for 28 minutes. So this is what we want to take into consideration while using it. When the system is turned on, it is going to give us information about which mode it is in. So if we turn it on right now, then we can see right now we're in normal mode, 1 hour and 53 remaining, and the range with that is 266 nautical miles. Likewise, you can switch it into high mode like that, and now it shows us the new range. And if you go to maximum mode down here, then it gives us 28 minutes. The easy way of doing this is that whenever you are running into icing, you just turn it on in the normal mode. If icing still continues to build, you go in a high, and if icing still continues to build, you go in a max. That's the easy way of doing it. Finally, you've also got the windshield button down here, and contrary to what you're used to from your favorite jet airliner, that is not an electrical windshield heating, but it is also based on the fluid from the tanks. The way it works is that when the button is pressed, for 3 seconds it's going to spray fluid onto the windshield, and that fluid is going to stay there for a little while and going to prevent ice accumulation. When the fluid is gone, you need to press the button again. And that's about as easy as it gets. Alright, so that is our little look into how the de-icing system works completed. We're now already just about 6.5 minutes from our first destination, Kiel-Holtenau. So we can just about use that time to check the latest weather. Again, for that I am using the Navigraph feature in here. So Kiel-Holtenau is now reporting 26085, slightly variable, 5,000 meters, light showers of snow, scattered 700, broken 1700, broken 3700, minus 3, 1007. Okay, set 1007. And yeah, that certainly looks like those forecast snow showers right in the front over there. So visibility is going to degrade a little bit, and the scattered clouds in 700 might have an impact on our approach as well. We have, however, covered our entire VFR stuff that we wanted to do. You now know how to fly traffic patterns, you know how to do a touch and go, and you now know how to do your air work. So how about we are going into an IFR part now, starting with an RNAV approach. It's going to be a runway 26 in use. So let's just go back to heading select, and we'll go somewhere on heading of 030 or so to get a slight delay. So we're in heading mode, give me 030. So let's make an IFR pickup at that point, and from the IFR pickup we are going to fly an on-off approach. So kilometer 3000. For that we can basically go mixture all the way forward, power all the way forward, and then give me a level change. I'll tell you what, we're doing 140 knots already. Just give me vertical speed, 1000 feet a minute upwards, and that's all we need. Okay, so procedure, select approach, and then we are going to go for an on-off approach onto runway 26. So our field is roughly in a nice beam position, so let's turn onto downwind heading here. Should be 080. Okay, on-off approach runway 26, LPV. Select. It's going to be radar vectors to the final. Or I'll tell you what, let's not go for radar vectors, let's go for a standard approach here so that we can see that in action as well. So, via Kilo India Lima, enter. The minimums we'll enter in a few moments. So what we'll do for now is to activate that approach, or just to load it at first. And then we can go to the flight plan. Kilo, oops, no. The flight plan, here we are. Onto the cursor. Kilo India Lima, direct to, enter, activate, and nav. So now we'll fly direct to Kilo India Lima for the on-off approach for the runway 26 at Kiel Holtenau. Now, just about leveling off in 3000 up here. Let's reduce to 75% power. Here we are. And we can just reduce the mixture to the cyan point. So back to the engine display. It's just a little bit bigger, I like that better. Find the mixture lever. And you can see you've got that little cyan indication up there. And that is basically what we want to use. But at first we're entering icing conditions, so anti-ice switch coming back on. Let's put it on norm at first, see how it's going to develop. Okay, so with that, let's take the mixture and we'll just pull it all the way back to the cyan indication up there, and that is basically going to be our most optimal mixture. Something like that. Okay, good. Okay, so let's now go ahead and do the on-off approach into Kiel, and then later we are going to do the ILS approach over at Hamburg, so that you've seen both in use. I can already tell you they're going to be quite similar to one another, so I'm not going to go into too many details at first at least, but just look at it this way. We're going to start with a chart, and we take the approach chart. You can see this is the approach procedure that we want to fly. This, by the way, needs a third-party plugin. That's the Navigraph plugin. However, the majority of flight simulators do have that, so for that reason, I am featuring it in this tutorial as well. Okay, so now we still needed to fetch our minimum, so let's just go down on the chart, or just go on the chart options, and then we can just go down for the minimum. We do have LPV on this airplane, so 339 is going to be our minimums. We can find the minimum down here on timer and reference. And down there, if we just scroll all the way down to the minimum target, we go to barrow, next, and 339 is our minimum, so we're gonna make that 340. Alright, like that. So, let's now go ahead and have a look at a couple of the other information we can find on that chart. I'm going to start at the very top of the procedure. So, might of course also just use the full chart to get us that information. So, final approach course 260, that's going to be set automatically. The final approach fix is going to be Barky at 2000, minimum 339, which is 250 above the ground. Field elevation 100 feet. Well, we're not pressurized, so that is not that important for us, with the exception that we can look at our altimeter and we're just gonna add or subtract 100 feet from our indicated altitude, then we know our height above the field. Missed approach, climbing track 260, Hotel Kilo 269, then turn right, direct Kilo India Lima, climbing 2000. But this one here is quite important as we're flying winter conditions. Barometric VNAV not authorized below minus 15 degrees centigrade. So remember the weather? We're above minus 15, so we can fly the approach completely like that. We can also do a cold temperature correction at that point if we wanted to. However, since we're above minus 15, we don't really need to. What's important though is our MSA 2300, and that one we need to correct. So 2300 at minus 5 degrees at roughly 200 feet, so 2500 is our new MSA. Now, from there on, we can go ahead and have a look at our missed approach altitude. 2000, that's below the MSA, so we need to correct that, make it 2200 as our new missed approach altitude. However, when you're flying under ATC control, it's always a good idea to ask them about if they want you at 2000, because ATC got the minimum radar vectoring altitude, which are usually lower than the minimum safe altitudes that pilots know about, and ATC can instruct you to use 2000 indicated anyway. But that's completely up to air traffic control. Okay, so what we need to correct though is the minimums. So it's 250 above the ground. At this temperature we can add 30 feet to that. So the 240 we dialed in previously is going to become 370 now. So 340 becomes 370. Here it is. Okay, and with that our minimum is now dialed in, and we are good to go for the approach itself. Couple other restrictions that we need to have a look at. If we have a look at the plan view, is maximum 140 knots at Hotel Kilo 261. So we're doing 145 right now. Those 5 knots don't really matter, but that's something for you to take into consideration when you are doing a flight like this, in conditions like this. Alright, so that is basically our preparation for the approach done down here. The only other thing we've got to do is have a look into the profile, flight plan, and now we just compare what we've got on here. So Barkey we set as our final approach fix in 2000 feet. That one, in an Airbus, we must not correct this. In this airplane, we can correct it. However, note that the procedure was approved for the... Oops, that's the wrong button. So approach, chart option, that's what I've been looking for. So note, Baro VNAV is not authorized below minus 15. So this means we can decide on our own if we want to do a cold temperature correction or not. In our case, let's make our lives easy. We are not going to do a cold temperature correction, we're just going to keep it at 2000. It means that we will come in a little bit low for our approach. However, it is within the part of the procedure that is authorized for our use. So that's basically how we prepare for the RNAV approach. The actual execution of the approach is going to be rather easy in an airplane like this. Basically what we have is our glide path. Note, this is a glide path, not a glide slope. So glide slope comes from a radio signal on the ground. Glide path is calculated by the airplane itself. So this is just what the computer says that we should fly. Down here we've got our typical localizer-like scale. However, the width of this one is determined by the terminal indication down there, but that's going to be part of our next flight. For now, suffice to say that terminal for navigation close to the airport is sufficient for our route of flight. Okay, the glide path coming in over there. We can start our descent to the platform of 2000. But what I'll do is I'll go down to 2200. Let's go vertical speed minus 500. Pull the power off a little bit so that we stay within the 140 knots specified on the charts. That's looking good. Okay then, let's go into the checklist. And we had done all of that, so let's get rid of it. And then we can do flight unknown icing. Well, we've covered that. We're going to talk about that in more details later on. So next up, let's do the descent checklist. Oxygen as required, altimeter set, cabin heat and defrost as required, landing lights on, they still are. Fuel system check. So we're now a little bit low on the left wing, so for the landing, let's go to the right hand tank again. Here we go. Okay, power lever as required is checked, speed is looking good at 140. Rapid descent, we don't want to do that, so we can skip over that stuff. And that's the descent checklist complete. Next up is going to be before landing. Okay, established on the final track. If we now simply hit the approach button, we can see the lateral part is captured already, and for the vertical, glide path is armed down there. So we can see our glide path coming in over there now, and once we're capturing that, we are going to descend on the approach. And that's as easy as it gets. Okay, so before landing checklist. Seatbelt and shoulder harness secured, fuel pump, boost, mixture. Let's just move over to the other side. Here we go, full rich. Flaps as required, autopilot as required. I'm going to leave the flaps up for as long as possible, really, because I want to avoid any ice buildup on the flaps themselves. But let's reduce our power. We already have glide path capture, missed approach altitude. We've got the temperature corrected one set of 2200. So, if icing conditions are anticipated for approach and landing, they are. Ice protection system switch on. It is on already. But here comes a specialty. Ice protection mode switch high. We're going to turn it into high. Monitor ice accumulation. If ice continues accumulating on protected surfaces, ice protection mode push button max. So right now, yeah, there is a bit of ice down there, so tell you what, we'll go to max. Okay, if ice accretions do not shed from protected surfaces, well, they will. Windshield push button press as required. I'm just going to give it a single press over here. Okay, to prevent an obstructed view due to residual fluid on the windshield, that's not the case. Ice inspection light is not required. Okay, then we can go flaps 50% now. Airspeed minimum 95, so we're going to keep that. And let's go flaps full. And airspeed on short final 88. The flaps ice warning is noted. If we just click on that, we can cancel out that acoustic warning. So flaps ice, full flaps prohibited in icing conditions, yes, but we're on final approach here, so we need to meet stabilized criteria as well. And we do meet the stabilized approach criteria here. 95 knots, going through 1,000 feet, fully stabilized. Perfect. Okay, normal landing, flaps 100, airspeed 80 through 85. Due to the icing, we'll add 5 knots, so we'll do 85 to 90 knots on the final approach. So we are going to clear all of that stuff. Okay, thanks. Short field landing, going to be a separate tutorial, so let's get rid of that as well. Okay, so back onto the engine page, and that's all we need. The approach lights are in sight in the front there already. We're going through 500 feet here. Let's start reducing towards 85 to 90 knots. And yeah, we did indeed catch a little bit of icing here. As I mentioned earlier, I don't believe that to be very realistic in Microsoft Flight Simulator right now. Anti-ice speed, that's checked, that's known, and minimum, continue. So, it's rather cold outside. For that reason we are coming in a little bit low, that's why we do the temperature corrections in first place, and you can see it on the puppy there as well, 3 reds. Okay. Autopilot disconnect, and now we can fly ourselves onto the actual final. 85 knots should be minimum here, looking good. Alright, power off. And we're down. Going to let it roll for a little bit because we need to take the exit at the end of the runway anyway. And that is our very first approach. IFR indeed zeros completed. Now we are going to taxi back to the runway and we are going to go for a full IFR flight towards Hamburg. Should be a quick 25 or so minute flight, so we do expect a lot of new stuff coming in during that though. Okay, here we are, leaving the runway. Might be a little bit slippery, so let's take it really slow around the corner. That's looking good. Okay, timer and reference. Let's click stop. That's an hour flight time for our first flight. And here we go. Okay, let's stop the airplane once the runway is vacated. Let's also put a couple of lights on over here, because it is getting rather dark. Okay, park and brake set. Now let's do the after landing checklist. Balk landing go around, we don't need that, let's just check it all off. Okay, after landing, power lever, 1000 RPMs. There you go, fuel pump off or boost. We're going to turn it off for now. Mixture, lean to obtain maximum idle RPM. So, lean, 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 lean. Eventually the RPMs will start rising. That's the same we did. That's the same we did prior to our first departure. Here we go. That's maximum RPMs. Now we can reduce our power lever again as well, as long as we maintain above 1000. Okay, flaps up. That's the flaps going up. Transponder standby. Transponder standby. So lights as required. We're going to put the landing lights off. The nav lights will stay on. Pitot heat switch off. Not in these kind of weather conditions. We're going to leave it on because ice is actually suspected to build up on the plane in conditions like that. For that reason we keep the pitot heat on. Ice protection system switch off. Off. Pump backup switch off. That's down there. Off. Ice inspection lights off. They're off as well. Note, as the airplane slows, the rudder becomes less effective and taxiing is accomplished using differential braking. Okay, that's understood. So, that's our checklist complete until here. Let's now go ahead and taxi back to the runway. And at the holding point, we are going to insert our IFR flight. A little trick there for the Navigraph users among you. If you go into the chart menu, if you are on the main page and then you use the FMS button to cycle through to the IFR or VFR charts, and then you turn the range all the way in, like that, you are actually going to get a safe taxi system. Look at that. That's quite cool, isn't it? That's only with the Navigraph charts though. Okay then, taxiing all the way back to runway 26 for our flight to Hamburg now. I'm going to talk about the IFR stuff as soon as it becomes relevant, which is when we're at the holding point with the park and brake set. Yeah, that was interesting. A little buck in the scenery there. Looks like here might come another one. No, that was alright. So as you can see, even with the power and idle, you need a little bit of thrust for the breakaway, but once you're moving, you've got sufficient thrust available that you can actually taxi the airplane, as you can see, in idle thrust, and you will actually need some manual brakes as well in order to keep your airplane moving at the proper speed. So right now we're going pretty fast, actually faster than I would go in the real world, that's for sure. In conditions like these, you know, get a speed of maybe like 10 knots or so. That's all you need, really. Okay, stopping at the holding point, and here we are. Okay, park and brake, a little bit hard to see. Here it is. Park and brake set. Let's clear the alert. Like that. Okay, so, first things first though. Can we turn on those dome lights a little bit? Those would be quite handy, but no, doesn't look like it. Well, let's use the flashlight to actually see them. Okay, no. Can't do anything up here. Okay, that's unfortunate. So, those are the only lights we got then. Okay, that's fine though. So, let's go ahead about programming our IFR flight. So, first of all, flight plan, menu, and select delete flight plan so that anything from our previous flight is going to be removed in there. When we are talking about removing, we can also go into the checklists. Up here we can hit menu as well, and then we can say reset all checklists down here. Now everything is basically reset for our flight. So if we now go back on the checklists and, for example, we select the B4 takeoff checklist down here, you can see everything is reset, so we are basically good to go again. Okay, cool. So now comes the IFR part of things. We're going to depart from Echo Delta Hotel Kilo, of course. So once again, mark it down there, Echo Delta Hotel Kilo, enter. And this time we're going to select the runway as well, and it is going to be runway 26. Alright, enter. Our destination is going to be Echo Delta Delta Hotel, like so, Hamburg, here we go, and it is going to be runway 23 over there. Alright, enter. Okay, now we can continue with our SID, so we hit procedure, select departure, and note that even though we just selected our runway, it still shows us all the runways there are for the entire airport. So we just gotta make sure that we actually pick the right one. So let's now go ahead and have a look at our SimBrief flight plan once more. And you can see that just about over here. So that's our planned flight. Cruising altitude 6000, Renzi 1 November departure from runway 26, direct to Bokmu for a Bokmu to Papa arrival, runway 23. So that's what we're going to enter. Okay, here we go. So in the list we can now select our departure. It is Renzi 1 November. Enter. And scroll all the way down. Load. Enter. Here it is. Alright. En route, you can now enter all your route. For us today, we don't really need anything because we proceed directly to the star. But just to show you, when you hit the menu button over there and you've got a previous waypoint in like Renzi, then with the load airway button up here, you can basically find and access all the airways. That's just to give you a little hint of how to load airways in the G1000. We don't need them for today's flight, but that's how you can do it. Okay then, procedure, select arrival, and we are going to go for the Bokmu to Papa arrival. Here it is. Load, and then we go again onto procedure, select approach, and this is going to be an ILS approach, runway 23. Enter. We'll take Delta Hotel 657 as our initial approach fix, and again that's basically it. The minimums we'll do later, so load the approach. Be sure to hit load and not activate, otherwise it is going to remove or skip over pretty much anything of the rest of your flight plan. Alright. So that's our flight plan pretty much programmed. Now we can just hit that cursor. Like that we can just skip through our entire flight and have a look at what we've got in here. So the rest of that stuff we're going to talk about when we're en route, but this basically is our flight plan in and our flight plan correct. Alright, so that stuff is in, and let's go back real quick. We are going to go for our standard instrument departure, so let's go into the charts, departure. No, that's not the correct sit, so let's just select it from here. Renzu 1 November, that's what we're looking for. And since it is so incredibly dark, let's just go out of the menu over here, and then we can do menu, chart setup down here, and in there you can actually turn it into, you can adjust the brightness, but you can also bring up the night charts, which are a little bit nicer to view at. Okay, with the range button, you've got up, down, left and right, as well as the zoom functions, as you can see. So what we are going to do is, with that arrow down, we can move down in the chart. You can also just go on the chart option, and on here you got things like header, plan, and so on. So we are just going to stay on all, have a look at the complete chart. Okay, so what do we have there? Report passing 1000 feet to Kiel information and contact Bremen radar 124.075. Radar is required. Departures entering controlled airspace when passing 1000 feet. Sets are also minimum noise routing. Strict adherence within the limits of performance criteria is mandatory. Speed max 250 or below level 100. Not applicable in airspace Charlie. Well, we are not going to be in airspace Charlie, so it is applicable. And if you get your zeros above that speed, then you've done something wrong anyway. Alright, let's just move all the way down to that one here. Initial climb clearance, 4000 feet. So let's go ahead and dial that in. And remember, 4000 is above the MSA, so cold temperature corrections are not applicable there. Alright, so that stuff is in. Now let's continue with the rest of our setup. What I'm going to do is I will leave the sit chart open over here, because I do find these things quite useful to have open during your flight, and we have a nav display down here anyway, do we? So, time and reference. First of all, we're going to reset the timer for our next flight, and then I'm also going to turn off the minimum down here, because, well, for takeoff we don't need it. Okay, and that is basically those inputs completed. Finally, transponder, code, let's just enter some sort of an IFR squawk, 2673, just because it looks pretty. And we're also going to turn the transponder on because we want to, you guessed it, be shown on the ground radar if one existed. Alright, with that, we are now pretty much all set up for our flight in terms of the avionics. So now let's go back to the checklists down here. We do have a lovely little home button that brings us right onto the nav display. So that's quite cool to use. Then we can go checklists, before takeoff checklist. So let's go over that. So, do not take off with frost, ice, snow, or another contamination on the fuselage, wing stabilizers, and control surfaces. Welcome to Microsoft Flight Simulator. No further comment on that. Okay, that is clear. So, doors, latched, caps handle removed, seatbelt and shoulder harness secured, air conditioner off. That is clear. Fuel quantity is looking good. Fuel selector, fullest tank. They are both equal at the moment, so we'll keep it on the right hand tank. Then fuel pump, boost. That's set to boost. Mixture full rich. That's full rich. Flaps set 50% and check. So they're moving to 50. Looking good on both sides. Okay, transponder set, so let's go ahead and turn it to Alt. Autopilot check, navigation radius and GPS set for takeoff, they are. Cabin heat and defrost as required, we've got them all up. Brakes, hold. So, we can do another run-up at this point, however, since we didn't switch the engine off, we don't need to. But we had it run below 1000 RPMs for a bit, so I'm going to do the run-up nonetheless. Here we go, 1700 RPMs. Alternator check we are going to do now, so let's have a look at the engine page. Plus 17 right now, let's turn on the landing lights. See quite an increase there. So that is okay, the system is working. Okay, so that stuff is looking good, the rest is on anyway. We don't see the warnings, voltage is looking good, pitot heat is on. Okay, nav lights on, landing lights, can turn them on now. Magnetos, check left and right, so let's go ahead and check those once more. Right side, drop of about 35 RPMs, back to both. Left side, same thing. Okay, magnetos looking good, ignition switch, we've done that, engine parameters check, power lever back to 1000. Okay, flight instruments, HSI and altimeters, looks all pretty good. Flight controls, that's quite an important check for us to do again, because after standing in icing conditions for such a long time, it's quite important that we actually check that they are still working. Trim set for takeoff, autopilot disconnected, and then if icing conditions are anticipated immediately after takeoff, they definitely are. Okay, ice protection system switch on. Ice protection mode switch, norm. Pitot heat switch on. That's on already. Cabin heat switch hot. That's set to hot. Windshield defrost on. That's not simulated, unfortunately. Ice inspection lights as required, we keep them off. Verify airframe is free of contamination immediately before takeoff. Yeah, welcome to Microsoft Flight Simulator. Flaps retract as soon as practical, and that's the before takeoff checklist complete. Takeoff procedure we are already aware of, so I'm going to skip over it. The same goes for the short field takeoff. So next up, we are not going to do a full power climb, but much rather we are going to do the cruise climb. So with that we are done over here. Let's go over to the engine page and then we're ready for takeoff. And we can either use the engine page, or what we could do as well is to bring up our departure charts. Both is going to work. Okay, let's clear that caution. I don't like anything blinking on the display during takeoff. And like that we are now pretty much prepared. So let's go back to the timer, prepare the start button, and then we are good to go. So parking brake released. Rolling nicely at 1000 RPMs already, so time to line up on the runway. Okay, that's looking good. So let's just about run our autopilot controls. We can synchronize the heading. We can turn on the flight director, and we've got a toga switch down here. If only we could actually hit it. Well, that's a little difficult at times in this simulator so far. Looks like there is not an actual click spot for that. Is there? Not really. Normally, we would put it into toga mode now. But well, we've basically prepared everything. So with that, we are good to go. Okay, cool. So if you are ready, then so am I. The timer is prepared. Remember the takeoff technique. Release brakes, increase thrust smoothly and steadily to 100, and rotate at between 77 through 80 knots. Okay, ready? Takeoff. Start the timer, increase power, power set. .77, rotate. And we're climbing. Speed is increasing. And we're IMC straight away. Okay, let's make sure we achieve the 95 knots as quickly as possible so that our anti-icing system is effective. Okay, got them now. And then we can retract our flaps. Okay, maintaining VY for our climb. And here we go, on the way. So with that done, let's put it into nav mode, level change mode, and autopilot. Alright. So we're through 600 feet, we can start accelerating towards our en route climb speed of 220. And just a quick look up here, a little bit ice still about everywhere, but as mentioned, it's Microsoft Flight Simulator. Okay, 120 knots, climbing. So let's go ahead now, go into the checklist, and we'll do the cruise climb lean off peak technique. We're through 1,000 feet, so that's good enough for us. Power lever reduced to 30.5 inches. You find that up here. Go 30.4 is good enough. Okay, mixture, lean to cyan target or less. So let's go ahead and do that leaning part of things. That's what we've got up here, the cyan target. And here we go. Leaned to the cyan target or less. Okay, minimum airspeed 120 knots. Fuel pump boost, that's where it is. Oxygen as required. We don't need oxygen for this one. Cylinder head temperature monitor, that's what we've got up here. And that's, if anything turns amber or red, then we know we got it. Have a look at that. And that's the cruise climb checklist complete. So, you can see our rate of climb is somewhere 500 to 600 feet a minute now, and that is actually completely realistic for the cruise climb technique in the Zeros. Well, you might ask now, so why do you do it then? Well, there's one primary reason there for it, and that is, it's more comfortable. Also, it saves fuel. So, it's two advantages combined, but the primary reason really is that it is more comfortable. Keep in mind, you do not have a pressure cabin in the SR22. So when you're flying it, you really want to make sure that the vertical speeds don't become excessive. Now, in an airliner, typically you get cabin rates of climb in the region between 300 to 500 feet a minute. And you know what that feels like. So by flying our SR22 at the same rates of climb as the airliners, we basically also create the same feeling of on your ears as you'd have in an airliner. Contrary to that, if you do a full power climb and the airplane would do like 1,000 to 1,500 feet a minute, that can become rather harsh on your ears, especially when you are a little bit sneezy or when you've got a cold. So, something to keep in mind as we do these flights over here. And that is the exact reason why they established that climb technique. Okay then, by now we should be identified by the radar, so let's climb to 6,000 feet, or flight level 60, which is going to be our cruising altitude. And at that point we might as well just take a little shortcut from air traffic control. The easiest way to do that, in my opinion, is through the primary flight display, but you can use the secondary controls down here as well. So you can just go onto the flight plan page. Let's now say they want to send us direct to Bokmu. So go to flight plan, that's this menu here, scroll down to Bokmu, and then hit the direct to key. And now you can see it's automatically brought up Bokmu in the direct field. Enter, now activate illuminates, hit activate, and now we're going direct to that waypoint. And that's about as easy as it gets, is it? Okay, what's blinking on the advisory there? Exit icing conditions. A quick word on that very message. The exit icing comes up when your de-icing system is turned on for half an hour or longer. It is just an advisory, that's why it is in white color down there. It is just an advisory to you, and all it means is, hey, your anti-icing system has been on for half an hour. You sure you really want to do that? And the honest answer to that is, yes. We'll keep it on until we're above the clouds, so that we can eventually turn it off over there. So just click that again, and with that we've taken care of the exit icing advisory we've just gotten on the True Alert system. Alright, again, after any turn you want to synchronize your heading, and the easiest way to do it is to find the heading bug, press the button, and that's going to synchronize it. Easy, isn't it? Sometimes I really like aircraft like this. Okay, so we are slowly getting out of the actual icing. Let's see our leading edges. Still a little bit of ice on there, so I'm just going to keep the anti-ice system running for a bit, and I'm just going to turn it to high as well. Now, we've actually got a checklist for icing in flight, so we might as well have a look at that right now. So go to checklists, and we haven't reached the cruise yet, so if we click the checklist button down here, we get the menu of all the different checklists. We can use the FMS cursor here to scroll through them. So we've got known icing conditions in flight. Hit enter, and here's the checklist. So if inadvertent icing encounter or icing conditions exist, yes, icing conditions do exist. Over there, for sure they will come again. So what I will do real quick is just to establish the normal configuration of the anti-icing system like it would be off. And now let's read through the known icing conditions in flight checklist to get you an idea of what to do. Okay, so if inadvertent icing encounter or icing conditions exist, they do. P2 switch, verify on. That should be running anyway, but if not, turn it on now. Ice protection system switch on. So that's ice protection system switch going to on. Ice protection mode switch norm. That's the ice protection mode switch in norm. Windshield push button, press as required. So got a little bit of ice on here. Now normally the system just prevents ice from accumulating, but let's press it anyway. Maybe it can remove a little bit of it as well. So windshield push button, press as required. Monitor ice accumulation. If ice accretion do not shed from protected surfaces. Ice protection mode, high. So let's just say we still got ice on there, it doesn't shed. So now we go ice protection mode, high. If ice accumulating on protected surfaces, ice protection mode push button, max. So that's going to be the ice protection mode push button. Just going to press that once for you to show you how it works. And now it is set to max. If ice accumulation on protected surfaces, so this is basically now the highest level of de-icing the airplane has. So now the checklist says if ice is still accumulating on protected surfaces, we put the backup pump on. That's the one down here. The backup pump is basically used because at this point the checklist suspects that something has failed in the anti-icing system, and you can see that down here. From here it now goes to perform anti-icing system failure checklist. So basically up here, if it is in max mode and ice is still building, then a failure of the system is suspected. Okay, so just a quick point, we're about to level off, so let's quickly set our altimeters to standard. We can do that by just pressing the middle of the barrow button up there, and you can see that select standard altimeter settings straight away. And now we're leveling off in flight level 60. Okay, the rest of the known icing conditions in-flight checklist then tells us perform anti-icing system failure checklist, and still use the windshield button as required, because that one's using a separate pump. So you can still use that button in order to spray fluid onto your windshield. Airspeed, maintain 95 to 177 knots or less than 204 knots true airspeed. Alright, so that's that upper part up there. While in icing conditions, flaps up, they are up at the moment. Ice inspection lights as required, cabin heat hot, that's what we have. Windshield defrost on, that is unfortunately not modeled, but make sure to turn the fan up over there. Anti-ice fluid quantity and endurance monitor. Ensure adequate quantity to complete the flight. So we can monitor that on the engine display. You can see that right now our fluid quantity has decreased to 1.6 gallon already. Running the system in maximum mode, we only have fluid left for 15 minutes. But you can see it's switched back to high mode, because max mode is only going to last for ever so long. I don't know the exact time limit there, but as you can see, it's switching back to the other modes with ample time remaining. And now we are actually going to go back to norm, as right now we are technically outside icing conditions anyway to conserve fluid, giving us 1 hour of remaining time. Okay, so now we have left icing conditions. You can see we are currently flying above any clouds, so there is no active icing conditions. So anti-ice system off. That's the anti-ice system off. Airspeed as flight conditions dictate, and the rest is basically as required, so use any of that stuff as required. Be sure to leave the pitot heat on when you're flying IFR. Alright, and that's the known icing conditions in-flight checklist completed. So now we've just leveled off at our cruising altitude, so let's just quickly go back to the cruise checklist. Okay, oxygen as required, it's not required. Cruise altitude established, power lever reduced to 30.5 inches or less. We're going to actually reduce it a little bit less right now. Let's make it 75% power. Fuel pump as required. And note the fuel pump must be set to boost during flight maneuvers or during maneuvering flight. So we don't intend to do that, so let's actually turn the fuel pump off. Okay, so mixture adjust. Again, you can see we're already at the cyan indication, so we are already at a good mixture. Engine parameters monitor, we monitor them all the time anyway. Fuel flow and balance monitor. Fuel balance is a good point. The right tank has been in use for the entire flight by now, so we can just shift the tanks around. So in order to shift from one tank to the other, first of all we turn the fuel pump to boost, and then we turn the switch. Monitor engine parameters. Always keep in mind, an engine failure can occur at a point like this, but as you can see it doesn't. And then we can turn the fuel pump back into the middle position. So that's fuel flow and balance monitored. If any cylinder temperature exceeds 420 Fahrenheit, you can see the hottest one, that's the one that's marked over here, it's currently at 335, so that's not the case. But if that happens, mixture lean 0.5 gallons and monitor. Alright, and that's our cruise checklist complete. Known icing conditions in flight, we're done with that. But just to show you some more options you've got, if you go into menu, then let's just reset the checklist for a moment. So now you've got the entire checklist open over here. If you just want to get rid of it, all you need to do is hit menu, and then you can scroll down to the check all button. If you do that, check all, you can see the entire checklist is completed now. Alright, and that's basically as easy as it gets. Okay, next up, we are already closing Hamburg, so let's go ahead with our approach preparation for the ILS approach runway 23 at Hamburg Airport. Also, look at that, the weather is looking quite a bit better over here. Let's just get the latest though. Charts, weather, Hamburg. 320 at 4, 8,000 meters, few clouds, 4,900, temperature -4. QNH 1008, temporary, 4,000 meters in Broome. Okay, so with that in mind, let's go ahead and grab our procedures. So we've got the bottom arrival over here, and we can see that all those restrictions are 4,000 or above at 220 knots. We'll be unable to do the speed, so we're going to tell ATC that we can't do it. But what we can do is go into the flight plan and make sure that our restrictions are actually all set to 4,000 or higher. Because as you can see, it imported them as 4,000, but not 4,000 above. So, in order to have everything correct, we're going to clear every single one of those restrictions. You can see this can sometimes be a little bit of work there for us to do, but if we don't clear them, the airplane just wants to be in 4,000 feet at those points, and we don't want that, do we? The only ones that we gotta make sure to keep in the system is the one at the final approach fix. And obviously, when you've got a situation like this now, where you have removed all the restrictions, you want to have a careful look at the approach chart to make sure that you actually still meet all the restrictions as required. So that's just something for you to carefully keep track of. Alright, so back to the charts. In here we've now got all the restrictions adjusted, and we still plan to pass all of them above 4,000 feet. So let's have a look at the actual approach chart now for the ILS approach on runway 23. First of all, frequency 111.3, you can see the system has automatically tuned that, and the identifier India Hotel Hotel Whiskey has also automatically been tuned up there on the actual, or not been tuned, but received and identified by the system. So like that, you don't need to listen to the audio anymore. Final approach course 228 is going to be set automatically. PSAS in 3000, we've just checked that on the flight plan page already. MSA around Hamburg VOR 2100, with the cold temperature correction applied, that becomes 2300. And that's pretty much what we've got up here. Now moving down a little bit, we can again use either that range button by clicking on the arrows, or we can just make ourselves the lives easy and go on the chart options and, for example, show only the profile or only the minimums. We'll take the minimums for today. We're a Cat Alpha airplane with an approach speed of 80 knots at the maximum landing weight. And that means our minimum is going to be 243. Due to the cold temperature correction, we add 20 feet, so 263. And in order to tune that, we need to make it 270. So timer reference, we can move all the way down here. Minimum, baro, 270. That's the small button down there. Okay, perfect. And that's done. Alright, so that is that part of the setup. With that, we are set for the entire approach. And now we can go ahead and do our VNAV planning. So if you go into the flight plan page, you can down here see the VNAV profile. You can adjust the target FPA, and that is also going to adjust your top of descent. Currently, we've just got 1.5 degrees in there, giving us 500 feet a minute. Now that is probably the easiest on our ears. However, ATC might require us to do up to 1,000 feet a minute, and just for the sake of demonstration, I'm going to show you how to use that. So by default, if you use a rate of descent of like 500 feet a minute, perfectly fine, that's the best you can do on your ears. However, it is going to prolong the descents quite a bit. So what I'm going to do now is, again, I press the cursor, like that. Now let's scroll all the way down to our active VNAV profile. You can see now the FPA is marked. Now we can use the small button to increase our angle. And I've just increased it to 3-degree angle, giving us around about 900 feet a minute profile. Okay, enter, remove the cursor, and that's it. Now the VNAV is selected for the new rate of descent that we wanted. Alright, and that's basically it. So with that, we are now all set up for our approach. On the previous approach, on the Arnav into Kiel, I showed you how to do the entire thing fully out of the FMS. On this one, let's pretend we're getting radar vectored. Our heading buck is set to a nice heading over there already, so let's go heading. And we'll actually go all the way to an intercept heading here. It's a runway 23, so if we turn onto a heading of 200, that should provide a good intercept heading, as we can see down there. Now, once our traffic control takes us onto a radar vector, we are just going to activate the extended center line. There's an easy way to do that. You click the procedures button, and again you can decide if you want to take the one on the MFD down here, or we've done that last time already, so we could also just take the procedure button on here. Both do the same thing. Okay, activate vector to final, and that is what we want to do. I'm just going to clear it off here. Okay, so activate vectors to final, enter. You can see now the airplane simply draws an extended center line for us. You can also see it took us out of GPS mode, and we are now already receiving the localizer. So that is about as easy as it gets for extending a center line. Now, I just want to do something different though. I want to fly direct to Charlie India 23 again. So just go to direct, select the waypoint, looks good. Enter, activate, and here we go. Alright. And then hit nav. Go back to GPS. Like that. And I think I've confused the airplane now. Let's try that again. Here we are, back in GPS navigation. The way I did this is I just clicked nav again to disarm localizer mode. Then I clicked nav again in order to arm GPS mode after the CDI was set back to GPS navigation. Alright, so the reason I wanted to do this is because with an extended center line you lose your VNAV guidance. However, I wanted to have some VNAV guidance available. As you can see, our top of descent is coming in a minute, and on here it is drawn on our map as well. Let's just bring the range up a little so that it looks a bit more sophisticated. Here we are. So that is our VNAV down here. Now, let's say air traffic control clears us down to 3,000 feet now. Oops, that was a little bit too much. So we're going to set 3,000 once again. Now all we need to do now is hit the VNAV button down here. And you can see VNAV path is now armed. And by the time we pass our top of descent, we are going to capture our VNAV profile. In the best case, you can go to local QNH prior to intercepting the VNAV profile, because otherwise the airplane tends to get a little bit jerky when you change the QNH while you're descending on the profile. But for the sake of it, I'm going to show you what I mean. We now have VNAV path captured, and the airplane is now in a nice descent at the target of 900 feet a minute. I'm going to reduce my thrust slightly since we've got a speed restriction of 170 knots over at PSAS over here. Let's keep the speed at about 170. Alright, and now we're going to go back to local QNH. An easy way to actually obtain the QNH is from the flight plan page. And just scroll down to your actual airport. Now we've got the weather indication down here. So QNH 1008. Now watch what's going to happen as I'm changing the QNH. You can see we're now a little bit lower than at first indicated, and the airplane is pitching quite aggressively in order to obtain the VNAV path again. So for that reason it might be an idea to leave VNAV first, go to vertical speed for example, bring it to a nice vertical speed, then go to QNH, and then use vertical speed to re-intercept VNAV. That just smoothes things out a little bit. In order to show you what I mean, let's just do that. Going back to standard. You can see now it's aggressively diving again to get back into the VNAV path. I'll just wait until things have stabilized. And we might be entering some icing conditions here again, so let's just put the anti-icing system back on. Okay, so we are now back on a stable VNAV descent again. And let me just show you what I meant. So we're going into vertical speed mode now. You can see it's capturing the present vertical speed. Now we'll set local QNH 1008. And you can see the airplane smoothly keeps flying on this. So now I'll simply adjust my vertical speed a little bit. Like minus 500. Now we could hit VNAV again and it would re-intercept the VNAV profile. Obviously, exactly at this point, since we just overflew the center fix towards PSAS, the airplane has automatically transitioned into the ILS indications already. So you can see we've got localizer capture now. So what we'll do instead of a VNAV capture is we'll just press approach. And now we've got glide slope mode out. Alright, and that's as easy as it gets. So let's now go back to the checklists and we can go ahead with our descent checklist. Here we go. Descent checklist. Oxygen as required, off. Altimeter 1008 set. Cabin heat and defrost as required. Landing lights on, which it is down here. Fuel system, check. So a quick look over there shows us the left tank got a little bit more fuel than the right tank at the moment. We're already operating on the left tank, so that's perfect. Okay, power lever as required, we're already doing that. So for a rapid descent, power lever smoothly reduced to manifold pressure 18 to 20. Don't intend to do that. Mixture as required. So we just keep it inside of the green arc over there. For rapid descent, mixture maintains cylinder at temperatures above 240 degrees. That's down here. But we don't want to do that today. Brake pressure check. And with that, we are pretty much done. Avoid prolonged idle settings. Maintain a cylinder temperature of 240 Fahrenheit or greater. So basically, that you want to keep above 240. Okay, and that's the descent checklist complete. Alright, we just have glide slope capture. So set missed approach altitude of 4,000 feet. Like that. Also, we can match the heading to the runway heading. Here we go. Now we've got the sun right in front of us, so let's get down those sun visors here. Okay, and with that we are once again done with our checklist. Next up is the before landing checklist. And tell you what, we might as well read that now. So seatbelt and shoulder harness secured. They are. Fuel pump boost. Boost mixture full rich. So that's a full rich mixture. Flaps as required, autopilot as required. And if icing conditions are anticipated for approach and landing, they are. So, ice protection system switch on. It's on. Ice protection mode switch high. High. Monitor ice accumulation. If ice continues to accumulate on protected surfaces, ice protection mode push button max. And if ice accretion does not shed from the surfaces, that's basically the same failure procedure that we looked at before already. Okay, so that's pretty much our procedure completed. Now let's focus on the actual approach. You can see we're just about 4 miles out, 160 knots, just like the airliners do. Now we can go to idle thrust and we can start aggressively reducing our speed, and we should be able to get the airplane stable by the time we reach about 1,000 feet. But let's see about it. Below 150 we can take the flaps out. So that's now. Flaps 50%. And look at how much better the airplane starts decelerating now. Over here we're going to get certain alerts in case we have deviations from our target profile. So right now it showed barrow because, well, we've actually set around QNH. Should be 1007. Here we go. Okay, we're below 110. Flaps to 100. Flaps ice warning is clear. But we're on final approach, so both the flaps ice and the anti-ice speed can be ignored. Okay, that's a runway in the front over there. Let's disengage the autopilot. I want to demonstrate you one last thing, and that's the stabilized approach monitor. So, if we deviate from the glide slope too much, like now, we're actually going to get a glide slope warning on the PFD. Now let's fly it right back into it. Just wanted to demonstrate that one to you. The same goes for the localizer, for example, and for some of the other parts of the approach monitor. So around about 50% should be quite good for the approach. The yaw damper is going to come off automatically at about 200 feet above the ground, like now. Okay, this low we are just flying in visually over here. That glide slope doesn't seem to be quite accurate to me. Right, flare it, flare it, flare it. And we're down. Keep it on the center line. And then we're going to take the next available exit. Well, that's just for the opposite direction. But that one in front over there, that seems like an exit we want to take. Okay. Runway is vacated. Let's set the parking brake for a moment and quickly run the after landing checklist. Gonna get rid of all that stuff. Normal landing, yeah, we know how to land that plane, thank you. Same goes for short field landing, that's gonna be for a separate tutorial. Bogged landing or go around, didn't have to do that today. Okay, after landing, power lever set for 1000 RPMs. Fuel pump off or boost. We can switch it off today since it is rather cold. Mixture lean to obtain maximum idle RPM. So let's just put the power lever back to idle and then lean it down a bit. Just playing with the mixture lever a little at the bottom of the screen there. So maximum idle seems to be somewhere about here, so we actually need a little bit more power. Okay, like that. Alright, flaps up. Up, transponder standby. Again, if you are on controlled airport like we are in Hamburg, then use on instead of standby. Lights as required, so we gotta turn the landing lights off. So, pitot heat switch off. Well, visibility is good enough that we don't suspect immediate icing here, so we can actually turn that off. Ice protect system switch off. Off. Pump backup switch off. That's down here. Off. Ice inspection light off. And note, as the airplane slows, the rudder becomes less effective and taxiing is accomplished using differential braking. That's the after landing checklist complete, so next up is going to be shutdown. Then again, what I like to do, let's go back to the IFR VFR charts in order to get our safe taxi. Personally, I'm a big fan of that. It just enhances safety so much. And if any alert is displaying, then be sure that you're in the main menu down here. Then you can hit caution, and that's going to turn off all those indications. Also, at this point, you can get rid of the flight director. Personally, I'm a fan of doing that. Okay, let's get taxiing. We're parking down here. That's the general aviation parking area in Hamburg. Parking brake can come off. So just a quick turn to the left and second to the right. And that's where we're gonna go. See, that one's X'd out. We can't take that. But this one over here we can. Maximum wingspan 29 meters, not a problem with an SR22. And then we're just going to go into the first gate on the right hand side over here. And we can bring it to a stop. Okay, perfect. So let's continue with our shutdown. So we just go to the checklists. So fuel pump if used, off. That is off. Throttle idle. Idle. Ignition switch cycle. So right, left, both. Mixture cutoff. Do note that they don't tell us to switch off the avionics before we shut down the airplane. That's interesting, but they don't tell us to, so we don't do it. Right, look at that. Quite a bit of ice here on the propeller. The anti-ice system should have prevented that overall, but it's fine. Okay, so mixture off, all switches off. Thereafter we are going to lose the avionics as well. So then it's going to be magnetos off, ELT, check the transmit light is out, and then only chocks, tie downs, pitot covers, and that's it. Okay, so then let's go ahead, turn the rest off, and that's it. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And that's it. That is our first flight and our tutorial completed. I would like to thank you very much for watching, and if you stayed with me all the time from the beginning, do let me know in the comments below. Thank you very much everyone. If you did like the video, then do let me know in the comments below. The quick disclaimer at this point, once again, I recorded this one using a beta version. That's probably the reason why there is still ice showing on the airplane and why the anti-icing system didn't do everything properly. But in any case, that is going to be it for today's video, so thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, do let me know in the comments below. Be sure to hit that like button if you did indeed like the video, as it is going to greatly benefit the channel in the YouTube algorithms. If you're up for more, don't forget to subscribe, and in the meantime I would like to say thank you very much and goodbye to you now. And if you really love what I'm doing, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.